And we're good in 3, 2, and 1. We're on.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Adventure in Truth podcast. Hey, Jim, how are you today?
Hey, Jeff. I am cooking along here. Doing good. Okay. Yeah. Glad to be here. Looking forward to another interesting, adventuresome podcast.
Right on. Yeah, so today we're going to poke around at and jump into this idea of what is an awakening. And it's a really, really amazing topic to get into. So both Jim and I are really excited to open up and see where this takes us. And for anybody that's interested in a little bit of the background or the backdrop of how did you guys pick this topic, well, it just emerged, but it's what we're supposed to be talking about today. I absolutely know that to be true. So Jim and I were talking a little bit about just a variety of different topics, but toward the end of something he was sharing with me personally, the word awakening jumped out, and it just seemed to tie everything we had been talking about up to that point together through the use of that one word.
Yeah.
It's also been a topic that I did 5 therapy sessions today, and it was probably a thread in at least 3 of the 5. So it's totally on my heart and my mind today. It's kind of that energy is all over me with regard to what is an awakening, when do they happen, why do they happen, what is the outcome? I mean, just a whole bunch of those fun places to try to explore what this is all about. So just with a little bit of historical background, I can't quote chapter and verse or text or even author, but I do know...
Hold on one second, I'm sorry.
There are many historical sacred texts that talk about an awakening, and usually you hear the word spiritual in front of that term. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but generally I think that's kind of the direction that we come to it from, is having a spiritual awakening. The Jewish culture talks about this happening at around age 50. And again, I can't quote chapter and verse, author, or even book title of where that comes from, but if you can Google it, it's a thing, spiritual awakening, age 50, Jewish culture, and you'll get a bunch of hits if you're interested in taking a look at that. From that, say, launch point of what is an awakening, our Western culture has the term midlife crisis to coin pretty much the same thing. And it's not so much I've got to have a rediscovery of who I was when I was 20 or 25 or whatever, but it's more along the lines of what used to rock my world doesn't any longer. And I've been on the planet. I've done 50 trips around the sun. I have an idea of what appeals to me, what doesn't, what I'm really repulsed by, what I no longer want to be a part of. So you get a lot of clarity really about what you don't want to participate in and be a part of any longer, but it leaves a void as you start crossing these things off of, I don't really want to be involved with politics anymore because it's like, it's just a black hole of emotion that you really can't do anything with.
Right.
And I'm not taking a position on that. I'm just simply using that as an example. How much money you make, where you work, what you do, all those sorts of things start to just leave the importance factor. They start dropping in your priorities of how much effort and energy you want to give to this, because the return on investment isn't giving you what once you thought it would.
Yeah.
So then you come to this place in your life like, well, what do I want? And it's like, I haven't asked myself that question since I was a teenager. It wasn't, as a teenager, you have the opportunity of, taking your little knapsack and your stick over your shoulder and going out into the big brave world and hope you don't run into the big bad wolf, and you build your house of straw. No, that's not strong enough. So then you get to sticks. No, that's not strong enough. Then bricks and blah, blah, blah. And the world doesn't come and, blow you away, so to so to speak. But this whole awakening, midlife crisis, it's a point in life, and it's not necessarily hard on with 50 years old. That's just roughly an average time where people are confronted with, how do I want to live the rest of my life?
Well, I will interject for those who also tend to go either more metaphysical or more to the spiritual end of things. This time period is also considered your second Saturn return. And the difference between, in astrology, sorry, I wasn't prefacing that. Saturn returns are a big deal in astrology, and this moving mid-50s into the 60s time frame is the time of the second return. And the second return is ruled by Neptune. And Neptune as a planet in astrology is where Saturn is all about structure and all about rules and laws, and the things that the playpen, so to speak, that we get to live in. Neptune is about all of the things, all of the illusions that we have built through the stories that we've told over the course of our lifetimes about things and how they are. And so when Saturn and Neptune come together in that configuration, part of it is blowing up the illusion of what was in order to see what is. And that blowing up of the illusion can have one of two effects. One is what we see a lot of, with many, the crisis period, which is going out and maybe doing aberrant things or things that you've not allowed yourself to do. Or the other side is, I think, coming into an awakening, which is the recognition of what all of that was before and what it is now. So I wanted to interject because it's just been spinning in there that it is also part of a science process, a different form of science, but it is a different type of science that talks about the same thing in quite depth and detail.
Mm-hmm. In a podcast we did over a year ago, in some way the story of the butterfly came up when we were talking about a transformation or an awakening. And I love talking about this because it just makes me giggle every time at the amazing facts we come up with science. But every once in a while, there's some head scratchers. That's the best that science can do, is use a term called magic ooze to describe a butterfly when it goes into a chrysalis, liquefies itself. And it rearranges itself at both an atomic and a molecular level. And when it reemerges, it literally is a different organism. Still had the basic ingredients that made it a caterpillar in one configuration and yet a butterfly in another. But it's just, I love the term magic ooze, and right now it's the only organism that we're aware of that does something like that. And science really can't describe the intelligence behind it. They don't know how the liquefaction part isn't necessarily so hard to understand, but the reorganization of it is still unknown as to how the liquid knows how to reorganize itself and then solidify into legs and eyes and wings and body and the rest of it. So that one example in nature is all I need for proof that there has to be some kind of an intelligent design, some kind of a divine energy that's driving all of this. I just can't see how something like that could happen spontaneously or randomly, but right. Not that I'm trying to make that point. It's just quite a miracle. That truly is a miracle in my estimation. But the butterfly, just imagine, one day you're crawling around on the ground and your whole life is spent from that perspective, worried about getting stepped on or plucked up by a bird or something. And then you get sleepy and you make this cocoon, and a few weeks later you're standing on the twig of a bush, and the next thing you know, you have this inspiration to go like this, and then you're airborne and you're flying and you're the same organism. It's like, wow, how in the world did this happen? So that's kind of what we're describing when we talk about an awakening.
Yeah.
Wonderful metaphor to go through. And I don't know if a butterfly eats anything differently as a butterfly than a caterpillar, that would be interesting. Or just physically, what might be different, other than where you live and where you spend your time and the amount of ground you cover and travel. But I do know that there are some amazing transformations that happen with people when they go through an awakening. And oftentimes it can be so disruptive that a divorce is the outcome. Time spent with former friends and family is radically different, because all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm this completely different person. And what I was interested in before doesn't hold any attention to me. I just lost my interest and attention in these former sporting events or these activities or hobbies or substances we used to consume every time we'd get together. It just, there's nothing there for me anymore. And that can feel like a death. So some of this, I hope, is now coming a little more full circle in our conversation we had before we hit the record button.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's for the listeners, this is part of what was our pre-conversation was this space that I have been addressing for quite a few months in my world, and it speaks directly to that, and this idea of knowing that everything is really good. My life is good. The people in my life are good. The situation in my life is good. I'm good, and yet there's this powerful energy that continues to pervade my consciousness, which is this concept, this idea of death and dying. And it's so interesting because it's not something I don't find myself being afraid of it, actually quite in marveling at, because it even though it may not be that I'm technically dying, it is also put in my face because of the type of person I am. If it's there, I want to stand and look at it. If it's there, I want to understand it. If it's shown up in my world, I want to reach out. I want to understand it. And so when something hits this hard or this intensely for me, I really take time and sit with it and be with it. And so part of that has been confronting as many aspects of death as I could understand, from, oh, wow, I could literally just drop now. Like this second could be the end. And then I think to myself, that seems kind of odd if you're on a path of being conscious that would be the way it would happen, that you wouldn't have some idea, that you wouldn't have some concept of what was going on. And so being in that space, confronting, and I think we've talked about it too in a couple of the podcasts, that moment period, that everybody largely were entrained to the idea of fearing death, and fearing not so much death, but the way that we're going to die, because somehow the way that we're going to die is going to make a big difference. And I don't know that it is. I don't know that other than the fleeting moment before it happens, that's it. I wake up in the morning and go, that's so interesting, because if I die, I just won't wake up. I won't come back here. I won't be in this reality anymore. What does that mean? And of course that stimulates all kinds of thoughts and feelings, and you just got to be in that and be with that and walk with it, because it's ridiculously liberating to realize that, or to even suppose, because somebody who's died is there now, so they can't jump back in the body and go, so this is what happened. But what we end up doing as a human species is we tend to make the worst of it. So instead of acknowledging the process, which is a transition that we all are going to go through, nobody gets out alive, that being able to sit with it, that again, tying this back to awakening, I think is a huge part of it. When you awaken to the reality that death is just a transition, like going to sleep, that creates a type of freedom that I don't know, I haven't grasped yet. I'm still grasping what that means. Because if you're not living from the fear of death, what are you living for? And that speaks to what you talked about at the beginning, which is having having things that engage you, you know, uh, what are you doing? What do you want to be here for? What are you doing? But when you take away the fear of death, and that's no longer an omnipresent kind of thing, it just becomes, oh, okay, that's going to happen at some point, but chances are good I'll probably be pretty conscious of what that is, whatever it is, mainly because that's been the whole journey, is to get more conscious. So if that's the case, and now I don't have anything to be afraid of, then I have everything to live for. But what does that mean? What is that in the terms of an awakening? What does that mean? I have everything to live for. Takes on a whole new context, because you're not, it's not just about getting up and going and doing your thing. And right now that's what it is for me. It's getting up and going and about doing my thing, because this space is really ill defined. It's not clear. It's very amorphous. It's very kind of directionless. And so I'm trying to take all the tools of the things that I've learned about, okay, so if I focus my energy in a particular way, I'll create a result. So I'm beginning to see that happening, where I see that it's changed from the idea of thoughts become reality to watching my thoughts become reality, to having a desire that shows up and having it manifest an hour later, because there's no resistance. Because now I'm, you know, again, the fear thing isn't there. It's just, um, there's an energy inside of me that says, oh, that that'll work. You know, little. I mean, to me, they're silly little things, but you know, when I'm driving is very random, because I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I'm going to go once I pick the people up until I pick them up. So I end up all over the place. And I shared earlier that I'd gone out to dinner with these friends, and I'd left a scarf at the restaurant. My friend picked up my scarf, and he had it at his work, which is about 2 miles from where I live. And he texted me this morning and said, "I have this scarf. I have your scarf. If you're going to get a chance, stop by." And I'm like, "Wow, I'm 45 minutes southeast. I'll get there when I do." And I continued to drive. I knew I left my scarf, and I wanted to get my scarf back, and we had that all squared away. I made no effort to get to the scarf other than to have the desire to get my scarf at some point.
Mm-hmm.
My rides took me to within a half mile of his work to pick up my scarf. I didn't have to do anything. I couldn't do anything. I was in the app. So I couldn't, I mean, I could have shut the app off and gone and drive from wherever I was to go pick it up, but it wasn't that important. I knew I'd get it at some point, but it became a part of my focus. Not like I have to have my scarf. It was like, oh, I want to get my scarf today. If we can work that in, great. And sure as shit, I get a ride that takes me to within a half a mile of where I need to be. Now I can shut the app off, run over, pick up my scarf, turn the app back on, and go on about my day. And it's all gorgeous ease and flow, and there's no pressure, there's no stress, there's no drama. It just is. And that's the kind of thing that I'm beginning to experience as a part of awakening, whatever that big umbrella is, to seeing when you don't have all those distractions, when you don't have all the stories, when you don't have all the stuff that's hanging out, and you just start to attend to your own field and your own energy, and then begin to focus it and play with that. If I focus over here, what happens? If I focus over here, what happens? And watching it unfold before my eyes, literally watching it, and me going, just stay out of the way and watch. Just stay out of the way. And when I say stay out of the way, I mean don't manage it, don't control it, don't try to make it be anything other than, I would like for this to happen. And it shows up. And not only does it show up, it shows up, I'm going to say at this point, in what I've been observing the last month, 98% of the time. The other 2%, I interjected somewhere. But so I hope I didn't go full tilt left turn here. I hope I stayed within where we were going with this. But since you drug me into the personal business, I might as well take it there, right? And for the listeners, please know that that is not that is not something that causes stress for me. So it's it's all good. And I appreciate you, Jeff, for giving me the permission without pushing me in and going, good luck, you know.
Right on.
So thanks for that, and it was good to talk about. But yeah, the topic is extraordinary in that I'm sure that it's different for every human being who comes into it, because your life experience and the things that your attachments are different. So as you release your attachments, as you release your connections that aren't serving or don't satisfy, it's going to have a similar experience, but you're going to be experiencing it differently than I'm describing it, because your emotional process is a little different than mine is. But there are key things in it that I think are consistent, and that's the experience, the ease and flow, the connection, the watching the stuff unfold, all of that. Excuse me. So I ran out of words for now.
So we've talked a little bit about the upside, or the process of getting to an awakening. You know, perhaps the rest of the podcast we could have some conjecture around what is an awakening like. You've talked a little bit about that. And then maybe some of the downside or the cons of an awakening, or going through that.
I like that.
So some of my personal transparent part of trying to play this in the same way that Jim does, that I love so much, is sharing his personal life and the applications of the conversation. I think are understood a lot more when you can hear somebody apply it to their own life. There was a time in my life, if you ask my dad, did Jeff know what he wanted to do with his life when he was a kid? My dad would say, yeah, he had it completely mapped out up till he was about 50, interestingly enough.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I pretty much accomplished everything that I wanted to do. I got it done early. And then I'm going, okay, well, what now? And all the time that I spent in the military, that once you start that process, if you're going to stick around at all, you can, with most assurity, map out how long you're going to be at each duty station, what schools you need to attend to next, and kind of the life cycle. It's pretty much almost like a science. If you don't mess it up somehow, you'll enter the machine at this end and you'll come out over here 20 something years later. And it's a fairly consistent process that you go through. And that worked really well for me for a long time. And that's what got me involved with all the academics. You know, you start a program and you just do what they ask you to do, and you come out the other side and you've got a degree. So, okay, well, let me go get another one. And the process is just the same. And before you know it, you got 3 or 4 of them, and like, okay, well, I think I've done enough of that. What else do I want to do? But then you get to a point where that doesn't really matter so much anymore. It's like, well, I've got enough money that I'm comfortable, and I've done enough things. I've had enough adventure, enough travel. Now, what about the giving back part? How do you enter into a life of service, devoted toward the betterment of others and your community or your society or your culture? And, that's an awakening as well. In the 12th step, they call that the giving back. In the last part of life, they call that the age of gerontivity, where you're giving back. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but it's been a while since I've used that word. But that's where we get geriatrics from. The gerontivity is this idea of I'm leaving my legacy behind for the younger generations. Mm. But so there's this process for me of what I would call growing through a disillusionment of everything that I had learned, most of which today I could say was a lie, a hoax, a scam, a sham, an illusion.
Just flat out not true.
Yeah. But while I was going through it, it absolutely was my truth. And it was really important to me that I could stand on, at that time, what I would call my truth. And what I've learned from that is, if you really want to believe something, you can find the evidence to support your beliefs fairly easy.
fairly consistently.
So,
And one of the things that I think is also remarkable about what you're describing is recognizing that it's that individual process, but that you're not it's not a forced thing. You know, some people learn service through volunteering or through doing activities that help them understand better about service, or they have a proclivity where they're already kind of service oriented. And I'm not talking service industry like working in a restaurant. I'm talking service as in what Jeff was referencing, which is what am I contributing to the greater good.
mhm.
um, I personally find that some get there that way, but that the idea of that contribution, and I really want to be, I want to make this a fine point for people in the process, is not to make that your way. Your way is through doing the work. Your way is through doing your own work in your own process and allowing the process to inspire you to the next thing, which it will automatically do as your vibration changes. So as your vibration gets stronger and brighter and clearer and all of that, you begin to attract and be interested in things that will stimulate a different level of engagement from you, that becomes organic and natural. So you begin to do things that in the past you wouldn't have necessarily thought to do or even would be interested in doing, because it didn't align with what Jeff was just saying, that particular consciousness that you were in at that point. Because like in Jeff's example, you know, he was in the military for decades, right? Decades.
Yep.
So that's a culture unto itself. So that in order to sustain that, you have to become that. So that's an evolution. And then you evolve past that, and here we are today. And being evolved past it doesn't make that thing a bad thing or an improper thing. It was absolutely perfect for what Jeff wanted in his process to achieve what he wanted to get where he is right now. And we all do the same thing. So it's not a judgment process, and it's not a contrived process. That awakening is a very organic thing that evolves. And if anything, I would say as a deterrent, not a deterrent, the other word that we used before, the not so great part of it is that it is an evolution, and pushing it doesn't get it there faster. It doesn't change it faster. It doesn't make it better. You don't feel better, and you don't get where you want to go quicker. So anyway, please carry on with your.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I don't have any numbers percentage wise of people that go through an awakening. Not everyone does. However, if you're going to, it generally would start in the latter 40s and you finish it before you're 60 kind of thing. But there are some people that it comes to them early. And an example of that would be a young Buddha, a young Krishna, a young Jesus, a young JFK. You know, they do come along where they have so much power and charisma and awareness. And really, without this sounding political, JFK truly was a visionary. His primary goal in becoming president was to get us off of our dependency of oil, believe it or not. And he wanted to electrify the eastern seaboard. We might have talked about this once upon a time before. But nevertheless, his visions were not adopted by the oligarchy or the old guard or whatever you want to call it. And really the same thing happened with Obama, that our country recognized we don't want another older person in office here. So let's elect this younger guy with vision. The only problem was he didn't have a Congress to support his vision. We needed a younger Congress, a more
Right.
Awake, aware, enlivened Congress. And I think that's happening now. I think the groundwork is being laid now, that between the last election and this one, that there are more people that could support a shift to take place. Because I think all of us are so fed up with the way things have been.
Yeah.
We don't need somebody in their 60s and 70s in
Very
charge of
much same
both
case.
houses and in charge of the, we just we don't want that anymore. At the same time, a 25-year-old, I wouldn't want one of the Kardashians in there just because they're famous and popular and they want to save the trees in Brazil. I mean, all those are important things, but there's a balance somewhere between wisdom and vision and being awake. And I hope this didn't come across as some kind of a political message or something. It wasn't supposed to be if it did. Just talking about the awakening and being able to align yourself once you're aware that you're going through an awakening, a transformation. It's so important that you have a small network around you of people that have either started to go through it with you or are maybe just a little bit ahead. But the fastest way to shut that down is to try to do it by yourself and still hang out with the people and do all the same things you used to do. You'll just shut that right down.
Well, and I think even more to the point is there, because again, I'm going to use my own personal experience. There is a clarity about who and how. And what I mean by that is there's a responsibility that I experience personally about the path that I've chosen in my life. Wow, this is incredible. That responsibility means that I get to filter to some degree how I impact people with my energy. And when my energy is going through something like it is going through now, it's not always stable. It's not always where I would like it to be. But I always strive to support it to get there. And some of the changes that are going on, I have no control over. It feels like it's not in my, it's not like I can close my hand and say, okay, stop now. Okay, my hand's closed, so I can do this. Okay, now I can open my hand. There may be skills and tools there that I've yet to learn. I just haven't, I'm not at that place yet. But the choice of who you engage is significant, because in some cases, if it's not a big deal, you engage someone and you're not really putting much stuff in their space, but because your energy is so clear in the process, your influence helps them to say things that help you to understand what's happening in your own experience. I think that's true all the time. But in this particular process, the responsibility is in recognizing who you share parts of that with and who you don't. Because if you share it in a way with someone who doesn't quite get where you're coming from, it sets up all of the things I think you were alluding to, which is old behavior patterns, old belief systems, old ideas, old everything about not being supported, not being understood, not being loved. And that's not what this is about at all. It's completely the antithesis of that experience, in that when you recognize the responsibility for how you bring your energy into the world, you get conscious about, okay, I want to share this. And when I'm doing this sharing, my energy is going with it. So we all have energy and we all have filters. We all have amazing brains that translate, and they're going to translate, and it's going to translate for other people. And you don't want that translation, as much as possible. For me, I don't want that translation to be overwhelming or misunderstood. So it's imperative to me, because if it's misunderstood, the information that comes back is tainted or twisted because it's not in alignment with where your energy really is. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it is an alone process. It is absolutely an alone process, but it's not a lonely process. Try that one on for size.
When you said that, it made me think of that caterpillar that in that state of ooze, which I don't recall how long the liquefaction process is, but in that state, that caterpillar doesn't even really have a mind that we're aware of to know that it's lonely, even though it's inside that chrysalis all by itself. We don't know how long it takes for it to have some awareness that there's other butterflies getting ready to come out of their chrysalis, but we do know that they're flock animals, that they travel in swarms.
Yeah. I'm going to choose the word compel because it's the word that I feel most strongly in my own personal experience, that the process for the butterfly is almost a compulsion. It's not, there's no thinking, there's no thought, it's nothing. It's an evolution. It's a compulsion. It's, I'm this and whatever's going on. I wish I had more words for this, but it just, as I'm even looking at it, it's this, yeah, it's like this compulsion. It's that spark. It's that power of source or God or whatever it is that is calling. It's like calling you forward. Come on, come on. And not in any other way than pure, supportive, 100% love. That's why this is so bizarre to me for my own process, because I think I said this to you earlier. I was joking about the kind of why hast thou forsaken me feeling, but I don't feel forsaken. It's more that I'm in that ooze phase. I'm in that things don't make a whole lot of sense right now, and my brain isn't computing and whatever, but I can't. We talked about it with the dog, how the dog showed up in my world. It's a thing that doesn't get to be. You have no room to resist. You have no room. There's nothing but, oh, this is what's next. Oh, this is and the personality is going, what do you think? What the, what, but that feeling that I'm becoming a butterfly, feeling that it's happening, whatever it is, it's happening. It creates a lot of anxiety. It creates a lot of confusion. It creates a lot of joy. It creates a lot of unbelievable moments of glorious frickin' shit. But it's all of that, and it's all good. That's the big difference. It's all good, and it's wildly disconcerting. So you just kind of go, okay, I'm going to breathe another day. I'm going to breathe. That's been a big piece for me, as I use my breath process a lot, because bringing in all that prana and chi and bringing in all that new energy and bringing in all of that release and all of that flushing.
Yeah.
Huge.
Well, part of what you were talking about, you're going through it alone, but it doesn't have to be lonely. Part of spending time alone, any kind of a transition always has alone time built in with it, so that you can really know that it's the real you. It's not lynch mob mentality. It's not current fad or go with the flow. This is you. You got to own it. The only way you can do that is you got to spend time alone to know who you really are, what you really believe, what you do and don't do.
Yeah. And how, and to me, more importantly, how's it feel? Is when I say how it feels, I'm saying that alone time gets you so dialed into your field, not from the place of this sort of self-indulgent, oh, isn't there, it's just an awareness. So you see how things coming in interact with your field. You experience what it feels like as you interact with it's that aloneness just gives you that space to just be 100% be, because the awakening is occurring in the beingness, not in the doingness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well said.
Some of the pros of an awakening, some of the pros that I've experienced from an awakening would be, if we could again use the caterpillar butterfly metaphor. A caterpillar's got a bunch of short little legs, and then as it comes out as a butterfly, it has fewer legs, but they're much longer, and it's used to hang out on leaves and twigs and sticks and things rather than crawling around on rocks and pebbles or whatnot. And it had to have somehow got an upload before it emerges out of the chrysalis into, you're going to fly now. You're going to somehow naturally know how to go like this, and wind currents, somehow you're just going to get it. You have to try it a few times, but It'll just be a natural thing for you to do. So if we can trust that it works that way for a caterpillar that's becoming a butterfly, and if we could trust so much that God and Source and nature have compelled a caterpillar to spend so much time crawling around, eating, and then gathering whatever it needs to do to make its chrysalis and do that, how much more so as a higher organism are we compelled to also go through this process? I know we have free choice and free will, whatever that means, but we don't have to do it. I think if a caterpillar doesn't choose to comply with its programming, it's just eventually going to get eaten by a lizard or
bird food.
I mean, you don't see caterpillars, I don't think, that have been around for 5 years. Yeah. I don't really think they exist. But some of the pros for me, as far as like, if I could look at my life before awakening and after awakening, these things I'm going to share may not have any meaning or value to others, but just a simple thing like lucid dreaming, being able to give myself permission before I go to sleep at night to know that I'm going to dream and that I would like to be aware that I'm dreaming so that I can interact with the characters that show up in my dream in a way to solve the conflict. Because that's all a dream is there some kind of a conflict, whether it's a little one or a big one, that's going on in my life that is there for me to bring awareness. That's why the subconscious unconscious is dreaming it, to bring awareness into the conscious mind so that I can set a path and a course to resolve whatever conflict there is. That one thing alone would be enough value for me to want to wake up and become more aware, more. And that, is that a spiritual thing? I don't know. I don't know what you would call that. But any time that you are using words like lucid, or we use metaphysical, I mean, that is a not necessarily hard factual science kind of a thing. But man, there's enough people on the planet that have been doing it that it's undeniably a thing. The idea of being able to communicate with souls that are not on the planet, whether they're angels, spirit guides, God, Jesus, my departed ancestors, my higher self, I mean, all of those entities that I can't prove exist, they do exist here, and they do exist here, and being able to create space that I can interact with and teach others how to do that too is something I could not have done pre-awakening. I, number one, wouldn't wanted to have done it. I would not have believed that it was possible. I would have even believed that it was evil, or somehow it was going to be, it would bring harm to me or anybody that I would want to practice that with. So those are some of the pros of waking up, is you realize, wow, I don't know who would have ever thought that love could bring harm, because these are all things that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. They're love-based activities, they're love-based energies, and love cannot harm. Love can only love. It's just love. There's nothing to be afraid of with regard to these higher metaphysical, spiritual things, because love is love. And it's really easy to tell what's love and what's not love. Really easy to tell the difference.
True that.
I'm sure if... Go ahead.
I was going to pick a con.
Okay.
based on kind of on what you were talking about. The con, one of the cons that I've experienced is, and you see this a lot through the spiritual and metaphysical communities, in particular, in my experience, is that a seeker shows up, someone who's, a seeker, someone who's wanting to get on a path, be on a path, wants to find their path, wants to, whatever the case may be, wants to embark on some spiritual type of thing. So they do some reading, and they go to some classes, and they get some crystals, and they do some things to engage, and maybe they start meditating, or they start taking a yoga class, or whatever the case may be. And they have very quickly some very powerful experiences. Where the con lies is that they get stuck in those experiences and think that's what the awakening is about. all that's happening in that experience is you've given yourself permission to let your vibration come up a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
allowing that to come up a little bit, you get to experience what some of Jeff was talking about, the things that occur as a natural unfolding of the awakening, that are a natural folding of changing vibration. And if you just allow that in a very natural way, it ebbs and flows, but over time and over the time of getting stable within the context of this new field change, it becomes more consistent. But we tend to get, I think, as human beings, again, we get it's like squirrel, we get excited by the flash or the cool thing or the this that, and then it becomes the thing we abuse ourselves with when it's not happening on a regular basis, which is driving our vibration back down again. That quintessential question. Well, it was doing really good, and I was really good, and I was really dialed in, and it was really working, and then all of a sudden it stopped. Oh, well, what happened? Well, nothing. I've been doing fine. And then my boss said something stupid and blah, 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 and suddenly they're on the bottom end again, and it's not working anymore. What's not working is your attention to the wrong things. Those things are awesome, and they are definitely some of the pros of the experience, but getting caught in that is a definite con, because it does not serve your process or you to stay fixed there. It's a wonderful thing, but that's where you build the appreciation, because appreciate it, love it, appreciate it, and just enjoy it. And it will continue to evolve and unfold for you. As soon as you want to grab it and make it a trophy, it's all over.
Yeah. Good points. Good point.
So that was my big con there. So I guess I should do balance, right? So I should have a pro. I think I gave quite a few pros a little earlier on. So
you did. And that, to kind of finish up my awakening or evolution, whatever you want to call it. So there was the vast majority of my adult life has been spent projecting a path to my future to accomplish certain milestones in career, money, finance, investments, possessions, status, degrees, titles, whatever, and to have experiences. I'm at a place right now where I have no idea what I'm going to be doing in the next 6 months. It might be what I'm doing now, but it could also be something wildly different. And there's no programmatic, structured program that I'm involved with that I know will take me somewhere. There's no course I'm taking. There's no licensing thing I'm doing. There's nothing right now that I could tell you I'm still on this path of upward mobility or whatever direction it is. It's just now watching the conglomeration of all the things that I've done in the past starting to resonate and kind of cook a little bit to see what's coming up from all of it combined. And it's a hard thing for me. It's a shift for me to sit in that and be okay with just the day-to-day joy of, I really do enjoy what I'm doing. I really do enjoy this time of my life, if not the best ever, really, truly. And I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. And I'm okay with that.
And that's one of the huge pros, which may not sound like one, but is so much so, because the experience of non-attachment and the willingness to be inspired by the universe, by the world, by everything around you, you really begin to trust that your field really is that significant. And it's so significant that if you allow it, it will take you to places you could never have dreamed of going in your own personal experience. That's been my experience the past 10 years. I've gotten to see and do things that I never in my lifetime would have thought I would get to see or do. But it was because it was about experiences, and it was about allowing. It was about letting I don't have to beat the drum every frickin' day of what I want. I've been doing that for 55 years. I don't have to do that anymore. I can have wants, but I don't have to beat a drum. I don't have to constantly tell the universe, here I am, here I am, here I am, here I am. You're already here. You're a spark. You're a part of this whole process. You're already ignited. You're already in there. So the pro of being able to stay in that space and let the universe delight you is freaking amazing. Because it will do it every single day, and because you're just there, you can't help but see it. And prior to allowing that, the only difference was you just weren't allowing it in the way that you allow it now. When you're not in resistance, it just flows, and it's just spectacular, and everything comes together in ways that you just kind of go, wow. Michael must think I'm a lunatic sometimes, because I'll be just days of like, did you just see that? Did you just see that picture? The way the light was hitting those rocks. And we were driving up the road the other day. We were going up to, actually, we were going up we were going up to enjoy a buffet. And we were on a main thoroughfare going up into the mountains, not the 70, but the 6. And we come around a corner, and there literally was a herd of bighorn sheep, literally right at the side of the road, and the side of the road was a rock face. And they were just hanging there, and they saw the car coming, and they started to spring up the sides of the mountain face. And we're like, are you kidding me right now? We're literally sitting in the middle, and I'm just like, I stopped the car. I'm like, I hope everybody can stop, because this is too amazing to not take in. Because, bighorn sheep don't just wander down into the fields, But that kind of, I'm just, you say, oh, wow, bighorn sheep. But yeah, but when you think of it in terms of the context of what you're doing, who you're doing it with, what your intention is, how your energy is, and then you happen into this experience. And I say happen tongue in cheek, because it wasn't an accident. It was a magical unfolding, and it just set the tone, and it was our date night. And it was one of those things where, he and I have talked about the wildlife, and we love seeing the wildlife, and gosh, we want to see wildlife. And there it is. Bam. Not down across the field, right next to the freaking car. It's like, roll down the windows, take pictures and movies. And so, but I go long-winded again, I'm sorry, but it's just, I get so excited about that particular pro, because it's so ridiculously satisfying and fulfilling all the time. Even with all the other stuff I talked about, that still goes on all the time. So there you have it.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we're at that point where we want to do a summary, or if we're going to get another burst of inspiration here.
Feels like a full circle right now.
Yeah.
You can always carry it on.
So I would just encourage people that are listening, they're definitely the type that are looking for, and if not already having an awakening of their own, to just be aware that to wisely place good stewards around you that are going to help motivate and encourage and guide you toward your continued exploration.
Yep.
And your development of listening to perhaps heart before head, and really just enjoying each and every breath you get to take, as you're contemplating what the next part of your life is going to unfold and be. And it's hard to, try to resist the temptation to measure it against what you've done.
Yes.
Because it's not about putting numbers in your bank account. It's not about the next bigger house or the nicer car or the cooler vacations. You've kind of been there, done that. And that doesn't mean that a spiritual life has to be sackcloth and ashes. It doesn't. By any means. It does not have to be that. But that's no longer the focus. That's no longer the drive.
Yeah, agreed. I think that, if anything, from my perspective, what I want everybody listening to really grasp is, Jeff and I, we're just guys. We're guys who've been on a path in our own lives. I'm it's not, we've been doing all of the same things that all you out there have been doing. You know, every day isn't perfect. Every day isn't unicorns and rainbows. Although the unicorns and rainbows are there, I may not be seeing them. But but my point is, as I'm trying to make a joke, the point is that we're all just people, and we have a perspective because we have a path that we've been on, and we feel like we can share where we are and where we've been and where we're going because we paid attention to our own process and we're willing to share that. It doesn't make us anything other than guys in a process. You know what I mean? It's not, we're not, do we have a level of expertise? Yeah, I think we do. We've worked with people. We work with a lot of people. There's all kinds of things that go into that, but in the end, we're guys having experience, and we're sharing that experience, and that experience is profound. And that profundity comes from doing the work. That profundity comes from taking those steps. And what we hope is that you can, through this process with us, navigate your process, be able to pinpoint some of those things, those maybe some of those obstacles that you've encountered in your own process, that you can kind of be easier about yourself with them, and that you can let yourself have the experience of awakening because it's natural and normal and a part of your process, not because it's going to make you better. That's not what the process is. You're already good. You're already better. Have you made choices that may don't serve you? Probably, but so do we. I'm sure I've made 2 or 3 today. You know? Now, do I make choices that I know obviously don't serve me? No. But sometimes, words come out differently than you want them to. Sometimes, it's the little things, but it's attending to those little things that make all the difference now. So we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for going on these journeys with us and listening through all of our craziness and willingness to just dump into whatever it is there that's ready to be unfolded. We appreciate you very much.
Absolutely.
And catch us wherever you like. If you want to see us live, we're not live, but see us in action, go to our YouTube page at Adventures in Truth Podcast, or we pump out our podcast to all the major venues. And we have our website, www.adventuresintruthpodcast.com. And we'd love to hear from you. Love to engage with you. And hopefully here in the near future, we'll be able to do that even more so.
Right on.
Thanks for joining us, y'all.
Blessings, Jim. Good night, everybody.